Blood pooled beneath the overturned sedan as the highway patrol officer lifted the crushed door and saw her face, eyes wide, lips blue, arms pinned like broken branches. The engine still hissed heat, but she was ice cold, dead hours before the crash ever happened in Los Angeles darkness that night. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the channel. She was 22-year-old UCLA senior Natalie Reeves, a psychology major with a near-perfect GPA, and a circle of friends who described her as reliable to a fault. The stretch of the 110 freeway where her Honda Civic was found was wrapped in fog that early January morning in 1995, the kind that swallows headlights and erases the city's neon edges. But investigators would learn that the fog wasn't the cause. The sedan had rolled under the concrete ribs of the overpass deliberately. There were no skid marks, no evasive maneuvers, no attempt to brake. The ignition had been cut before impact. The medical examiner wrote in dense black type, "Cause of death, manual strangulation, not collision trauma." Natalie's body bore faint bruising along the clavicle, a thumbprint-shaped contusion under the jawline, and a broken fingernail embedded with a thread of dark wool not belonging to any garment she owned. Time of death was set between 1:15 and 2:00 a.m., but the crash site call came in at 3:47 a.m., leaving a gap too long to explain. The pride of a Los Angeles campus became the center of the most perplexing case the Rampart precinct had handled that decade. Detectives canvassed the Santa Monica apartment Natalie shared with another student. Nothing was forced, nothing disturbed. Her purse was missing, but her wallet was left behind. A half-drunk mug of chamomile tea sat on the counter, still fragrant. The TV remote rested beside a stack of notes on developmental psychology. No sign of panic, no scrawl of farewell. Her roommate, asleep after a late shift, woke to police knocking at the door just after sunrise. She swore Natalie had been home studying until at least 11:30 p.m. and had mentioned a meeting at midnight with someone connected to her senior research, though she hadn't specified who. The roommate assumed it was a faculty assistant or a study subject. The police assumed differently. The Los Angeles Times devoted half a column by day 2, then full front-page coverage by day 5. A campus candlelight vigil stretched across Royce Quad, hundreds of blue flames trembling in the Pacific air. The university president promised full cooperation, but behind the podium, faculty faces were tight with anxiety. Natalie had been compiling data on a controversial campus psychology program involving high-pressure cognitive stress tests on volunteer students. Some participants later complained of emotional side effects. One filed an anonymous ethics grievance that quietly dissolved. Police pieced together her final hours. Surveillance from a Wilshire Boulevard ATM showed her withdrawing $20 at 12:06 a.m., her expression unreadable. A parking lot exit camera timestamped her Civic leaving minutes later. Then she vanished from footage until the crash discovery. No bar receipts, no restaurant sightings, no friend testimonies, just that ATM recording her blinking into harsh monochrome bank light. The Civic told its own story. The seatbelt was buckled, but she hadn't been breathing when it latched. Her hair was neatly brushed, no glass shards in the strands, no panic-induced tangles. A faint smudge of mascara streaked right cheek, not from tears but contact, a gloved hand pressing her face perhaps. The passenger door bore a partial print, smudged but traceable to a leather glove type common among LAPD officers, though such gloves were widely purchased citywide. Detectives floated theories. A staged suicide, a jealous boyfriend, a research subject who resented invasive questions, a faculty member fearful of an ethics scandal. Her boyfriend, a law student, had an airtight alibi and broke under questioning without yielding suspicion. Her advisor, a stern cognitive scientist known for avant-garde stress induction protocols, refused to answer without counsel and took a sudden semester sabbatical. He was never charged, but his silence stained every microphone he faced. A week into the investigation, a maintenance worker came forward. He had been repairing street lamps near the overpass that night and saw a dark sedan idling with headlights off around 3:15 a.m. He assumed it was a broken-down driver until another vehicle appeared, a panel van, unmarked, sliding in behind it. 20 minutes later, he heard the metallic scream of a body dragging metal against concrete, then nothing. He did not report it. In Los Angeles, metallic screams could be anything: film shoots, junkyard runs, street racers. His regret would haunt him when he identified Natalie's Civic from newsprint photographs. The lab isolated microscopic wool fibers matching those under Natalie's nail. They were rare, woven in limited edition varsity jackets made for the UCLA 1994 football season. Only 87 existed. Detectives pulled rosters, yearbook images, booster lists. They interviewed former players, coaches, trainers. Many jackets were resold, stolen, pawned, vanished into thrift store anonymity. The fiber trail collapsed under the weight of the city's flea markets and Goodwill bins. The autopsy revealed another detail: traces of chlorhexidine, a surgical antiseptic, along her inner wrist, as though someone wiped her skin hours before death. Not enough to indicate hospital care, but enough to imply sterile preparation. A disinfected girl, strangled cleanly, seatbelted post-mortem, crashed without violence. It felt rehearsed, practiced. Natalie's research files disappeared from her campus office. The lock showed no tampering. Campus IT logs indicated they were accessed at 2:54 a.m., just within her death window. Someone used her credentials from a terminal in the psychology building. Security guard shifts confirmed the wing was empty. The access card panel offered no camera coverage. The hallway lens had malfunctioned weeks earlier and repairs were pending. When detectives requested the building's access logs beyond the 72-hour retention window, they learned they had been overwritten by routine system purge, a procedural failure or quiet obstruction. In February, the case cooled. Students returned to midterms. Reporters moved on to unrest in the city's transit budget crisis. But the detectives didn't forget. One, Detective Ada Morales, stored Natalie's photo in her desk, a quiet rebellion against filing cabinets and forgotten names. She noted the wool thread, the antiseptic trace, the vanished files, the silent advisor, the campus wing with convenient camera failure. She wrote a timeline in pen, not digital ink that could be erased. Midnight ATM, 12:30 departure, 1:15 killing, 2:54 file access, 3:47 discovery, everything too neat, too spaced, too clinical. A year passed. An ethics review rocked the psychology department when documents surfaced alleging unapproved testing protocols. Faculty scattered. Students whispered. The advisor resigned. No one linked it publicly to Natalie. Only Morales kept the threads pinned on a corkboard, arranged like a vengeful geometry, campus to ATM to overpass to morgue. In 1997, a pawn shop in Echo Park surrendered a 1994 UCLA varsity jacket to police after an unrelated burglary sting. Forensics tugged a single-course wool thread, identical weave to the one under Natalie's nail. The jacket had no clear owner. Its tag was ripped, its lining stained with bar smoke. Morales pressed it, almost reverently, knowing it was a fragment of a story that refused completion. A campus star, a clean killing, a city defined by lights but built on shadows. And in the fibers, the grip of the last hand that held her throat before buckling her into a seatbelt she would never breathe against again. Bloodless precision remained the signature of her death, a hallmark that never aligned with random violence or impulsive rage. Lowe's Angels in the late 90s was still bruised from civil unrest and police scandals, but Natalie's case didn't fit chaos. It fit calculation. It fit planning. The killer did not fear detection. The killer expected competence to fail. And for nearly 2 years, it did. Detective Morales continued to audit every closed file related to unauthorized academic experiments on UCLA students from 1993 to 1995. Any reference to neuro-induced stress responses, sensory overload tests, isolation analysis, all were noted in her private ledger. Natalie's research folder, what little remained in photocopied fragments, touched on behavioral collapse under high-pressure psychological stimuli. The study wasn't designed to harm subjects, yet the ethics notes implied at least one participant had suffered severe breakdown symptoms, hallucinations, paranoia, dissociative memory gaps. Morales suspected this ghost participant, unnamed and purged from the roster, had returned to campus in secret, driven not by revenge, but by a form of delusion triggered and then ignored. By 1998, the varsity jacket connection re-emerged when forensic technicians reprocessed the jacket's lining with updated spectrographic tools. Embedded in the inner cuff was a microscopic particle of blue automotive paint. It matched the color and manufacturer code of Natalie's Honda model, the same paint later documented from the sedan's mangled left panel. Someone wearing that jacket had direct contact with the car before it was sealed and pushed beneath the overpass. The lab concluded that the paint transfer came from friction on the inside cuff, consistent with the angle of a pulling motion, someone gripping the driver's door edge or steering column, dragging or rotating the vehicle post-mortem. Across campus, those who remembered Natalie's brilliance spoke cautiously. Her advisor had vanished to an East Coast institution but never taught again. A retired professor, once on her ethics review panel, admitted to Morales that Natalie had been preparing a report challenging her department's secrecy. She had discovered long-term psychological risks embedded in certain experiments, but was advised to reframe results to mitigate potential public alarm. That line carried weight, and Morales wrote it verbatim in her notebook. If she had intended to expose negligence, someone may have feared public scandal more than justice. Police archives eventually released a suppressed note. 2 days before her death, Natalie left a voicemail at the psychology dean's private office. The message, transcribed but erased from tape, read, "I've found the missing names. I need to talk in person. Midnight is fine." No names were recovered, but Morales believed she had finally mapped the secret meeting referenced by Natalie's roommate. Midnight. A restricted office wing. Someone she trusted, or someone who convinced her they held the same secret. The van sighting near the overpass became relevant again when traffic patrol logs revealed a permit granted to a private research courier vehicle that same month, authorized to transport sensitive academic materials. The listed operator never responded to follow-up questioning and left California shortly after the crash. The van's description matched the maintenance worker's memory. No external logos, matte paint, silent arrival. A courier transporting files that Natalie uncovered, or a decoy to remove them before questions could be asked. Over time, case notes thickened with contradictions. A clean kill, yet a public placement under a bridge. A stolen purse, yet untouched wallet. Deleted research files, yet preserved ATM footage. Morales saw not sloppiness but choreography. Someone had intended this death to appear as a tragic accident for the news cycle, but preserved just enough anomalies to paralyze investigation in procedural uncertainty. She wondered if the killer wanted discovery, but on their terms, at their pace. In 2001, a campus storage overhaul unearthed a forgotten box containing stress study consent forms. Each participant listed pseudonyms, not legal names, to protect confidentiality. One stood out, initials matching none on campus rolls. RG. The handwriting analysis suggested a male in early 20s. Security badge audits showed a temporary research assistant registered under a similar code, who vanished from payroll records after only 6 weeks. The lab description mentioned his abnormal stress tolerance during testing and his abrupt dismissal after behavioral instability incidents. The university claimed confidentiality. Morales called it cover. She cross-referenced hospital admissions for any former UCLA student with breakdown symptoms in late 1994 and found a psychiatric intake. Patient male, age 23, admitted under emergency hold for delusionary recall triggered by experimental stimuli. He left against medical recommendation weeks before Natalie's death. The intake report named 3 supervising faculty, including Natalie's advisor, the same advisor who fled through academic silence. Morales drafted a renewed warrant, but budget cuts buried it. LAPD redirection prioritized gang-related homicides. A strangled honor student faded to archives. The case lingered in basement dust until 2005 when digital forensics unexpectedly revived the missing logs. A legacy server in the psychology wing, slated for disposal, held phantom backups, access metadata from January 1995. At 2:54 a.m., Natalie's credentials logged in, but beneath that entry lay another, masked under admin override, RG authorized level. His login accessed not her academic files but a restricted database of neurological stress trial outcomes. Exactly 7 minutes later, her credentials were used, almost certainly by someone other than her. Those 7 minutes became the missing heartbeat of the case. The recovery triggered departmental alarm. The digital forensics clerk who retrieved the files resigned weeks later. A dean retired abruptly. The university publicly denied all connection to student endangerment, calling press inquiries misinterpretations of historical records. Evening News revived the case on its 10th anniversary. Archival footage of the overturned sedan flickered across local stations. Former classmates offered soft memories. Her mother, still living near Ventura Boulevard, stated she left her daughter's room untouched for 10 years, the air preserved with citrus and notebook paper. She asked why a girl who feared freeways at night would drive alone past midnight. Morales answered internally. She trusted whoever she met. Speculation returned, this time fueled by documentaries. Private investigators chased leads with amateur fervor, contacting Morales for archives she refused to release. The varsity jacket resurfaced on message boards as a conspiracy artifact, its rare wool thread treated like relic. One former football trainer admitted on camera that boxes of jackets had been distributed beyond players, gifted to donors, faculty, research contributors. More hands touched that wool than the public ever imagined. 15 years later, Lowe's Angels had changed, but the bridge where Natalie was found remained unchanged concrete under weathered graffiti. A new detective generation studied her file in training seminars. Cold case analysts returned to the chlorhexidine antiseptic. Why disinfect a wrist but inflict asphyxiation? They proposed sedation, abandoned injection, then strangulation chosen for silence. She was not attacked, she was controlled. In 2015, DNA reprocessing with improved touch analysis isolated partial male genetic material on the seatbelt buckle. Degraded but viable. The lab compared the profile against faculty, former students, known offenders. No match. But the sequence held markers consistent with a Californian male of approximate age that aligned with RG's hospital record. Morales, then retired, visited the precinct to read the update. She touched the file's edge, her hand steady. The city's archivists eventually compiled Natalie's timeline into a single narrative, stripped of speculation. Brilliant student, research whistleblower, midnight meeting, antiseptic trace, jacket fiber, staged crash. But behind those facts was the unrecorded truth of an institution that protected prestige over accountability. Natalie's case passed into legend, not sensational, not theatrical, but methodical, clinical, chilling. In lectures on investigative procedure, cadets learned that sometimes a clean crime scene is the dirtiest sign of all. She remained frozen in Lowe's angel's memory. A girl who followed data too far, a witness who spoke to the wrong listener, a name carried forward by one detective who refused to file her away. Between the bridge shadows and the silent psychology wing, the city still whispered her chronology. Midnight, strangulation, deletion, fabric fiber, 7 minutes of access, a life bracketed by precision and erased with equal care. She did not return to headlines again until the 25th anniversary, when a podcast host with a fixation on unsolved academic scandals aired a 3-part investigation. It became a quiet storm. No celebrity appeal, no sensationalism, just steady, clinical dissection of documents that had been sealed too long. Former tech staff from UCLA's psychology department came forward under anonymity, claiming servers were deliberately wiped in mid-1995 under administrative directive. Not a normal purge, not routine maintenance, targeted destruction of trial logs, participant rosters, and research correspondences. What remained on tape was insufficient to convict anyone, but the pattern was unmistakable. Every record that tied stress trial failures to real names, to real students, vanished. Natalie wasn't simply a casualty. She had uncovered something designed never to be seen. Detective Morales, in her late 60s then, consented to one interview. She spoke only in verifiable facts, refusing to indulge conjecture. She noted timestamps, forensic inconsistencies, the transfer of blue paint on varsity wool, the antiseptic, the missing $20, the silent van. Her restraint was more damning than speculation. When the host asked why she never let the case go, Morales gave the only personal answer she ever allowed the public. She trusted someone, and they used that trust to silence her. That does not get to stand. The podcast reignited public record requests. UCLA issued a statement of condolence, detached and procedural, reiterating that no causal link had ever been legally established between departmental studies and Natalie's death. But that same week, a retired campus IT officer submitted an affidavit to the cold case unit. He had been ordered on the morning of January 4, 1995, to clear terminal access files for faculty review. He claimed he didn't know the relevance then but suspected it later. The timing aligned precisely with the post-mortem file deletions. His name was redacted in every released document, but the log signature proved he existed. New forensic scans applied to the varsity jacket uncovered something previously undetected, a flake of dried antiseptic residue embedded in the sleeve fibers. The same chlorhexidine compound lifted from Natalie's wrist. The conclusion was no longer circumstantial. Whoever wore that jacket handled her after she was disinfected, before she was buckled. It was enough to reopen the case on paper, if not in court. 2 years later, the state assembled a silent task team for historical cold case review. They reconstructed the digital timeline. Natalie researches stress-induced behavioral collapse. She discovers withheld participant records. She arranges a midnight disclosure meeting. She is killed cleanly. Her files are accessed 19 minutes before discovery. Her credentials are used by someone else. Physical evidence is staged to mimic accident. The state's internal memo classified the incident as possible academic malpractice, linked homicide. But legal pursuit was impossible due to expired statutes and vanished personnel. But failure to prosecute did not mean failure to expose. A collective of investigative journalists built a dossier tracing research funding streams from 1992 to 1994. The psychology department had secured private defense sector grants for cognitive resilience modeling, programs intended for military psychological endurance profiling. Nowhere on record did it state that student volunteers were exposed to experimental intensities without long-term safety clearance. Natalie's notes, preserved only in her roommate's photocopy, implied she had identified these private funding directives and the ethical breach they concealed. What happened next wasn't resolution, it was recognition. The city council motioned to name a small study alcove at UCLA's psychology library in her memory. The plaque was minimalist, factual, emotionless by institutional design, in remembrance of Natalie Reeves, 1973-1995, scholar, researcher, contributor. It omitted what she exposed, what she threatened to reveal, and what it cost her. Still, students lit candles every January beneath that brass rectangle, in defiance of official restraint. Morales, retired but unyielding, kept visiting the bridge once a year. Not to chase ghosts, she never believed in any, but to honor ritual. She would stand beneath the rusted underpass where Natalie's car was discovered and listen to the city's unbroken hum. Cars roared overhead as they had that night. The fog still settled in its winter pattern, thick, low, swallowing the freeway's sodium glow. Nothing about the place changed, which itself felt like an indictment. In 2022, the partial touch DNA from the seatbelt was run again against expanded national databases. A weak hit surfaced, familial, not direct. A relative of RG, long removed from California. The state prepared quiet outreach. Nothing prosecutable emerged, but one truth concretized. RG was real, was connected, and disappeared only because someone with authority made it effortless for him to vanish. He was not the architect, just a fracture point in a larger structure. A subject who broke under pressure, then was discarded, then reappeared in Natalie's final hours like a shadow summoned by unfinished science. The case never gained Hollywood treatment. No dramatized miniseries, no sweeping orchestral retelling. It lived where true cold cases reside, in reports, in binders, in forensic bulletins, in the quiet recollections of those who refused to let administrative dust claim the last word. The city continued without interruption. New crimes rose. New victims claimed the limited bandwidth of public empathy. But Natalie's timeline, though closed, was never sealed. No arrest, no conviction, no confession, yet the narrative was no longer opaque. She had uncovered a human trial program that operated beyond its ethical leash. Someone believed exposure would cost careers, funding, perhaps reputations embedded in institutions too proud to acknowledge harm. And so her voice was stilled before disclosure could reach morning. Just after her 50th birthday would have passed, a letter arrived at Morales's mailbox from an anonymous source. No signature, no address, no personal sentiment, only a single sentence handwritten with exacting precision. She was right about all of it. Enclosed was an access badge from the psychology wing, expired January 1995. Morales placed it beside the wool thread and the photo she'd carried for decades. Lowe's Angels forgets quickly, but it never erases completely. Bridges keep their echoes. Campus corridors retain footsteps of those who walked them last. And every so often, beneath freeway thunder, when fog lowers over the concrete and sodium light bends thin, the memory returns of a girl who followed evidence to the point where city and institution could no longer allow her voice to continue. Her case remains unsolved. Her findings remain buried. Her name remains spoken only by those who refuse silence.